closer, I guess.
Hello everyone, and welcome here to our match between Il Server and Team Z. This is a friendly competition. My name is Ben Kiriakou, joined here by the ever so friendly current world champion, reigning world champion, Gio Siski. And Gio, how you doing this evening?
I'm great. I'm really excited to watch. Yeah, I'm really excited to watch some high-level Pokemon. Of course, for you all over there in Europe, it's evening by now. But we have some really exciting matches for us to help close out this friendly match that's been ever so fun to participate in.
Yeah, it's been really cool. So much like high-level competition as well, especially with champions just getting introduced. Like seeing what all of our top players that have been competing have been using, and how the metagame is even developing in its young stages has been really great to see. Now, if you just joined us, we already have a set of matches that were streamed before on Friday, and this is the result. So Il Server 3 and Team Z 4. So a little bit of a lead here for Team Z, and the question is whether or not that lead can be closed up by Il Server, or if Team Z is going to take it all of the way this evening.
Yeah, last time we actually had some really interesting matches on our stream match. The one that I particularly think was the most interesting that I think everybody should watch was Fede Campo versus Roxanne. That one was really funny because Antonio had a timeout on turn 1 of game 1 with no Mega Evolution on a Mega Gengar team, and then somehow still managed to claw it back. Very insane game there, and considering the difficulties with timeouts recently with the menu selection, very impressive to come back from that. That's pretty much unheard of nowadays, especially at the highest level of competition.
Definitely, it's like usually one turn going wrong, maybe you have a little bit more chance. I think in Champions you get a little bit more chance. The games are slightly longer than, say, Regulation Set I, but actually, like, especially timing out and not megaing and then not doing something valuable with your Mega Pokemon feels like almost like 2 turns lost for the price of 1, really, doesn't it? It's quite a lot to come back from. That sounds really great. So, without further ado, let's get on to our first match that we're going to be featuring here today. This is going to be Sanvi versus Justin Tang, Unironic Panda, and a little bit of a preview here about what Sanvi's going to be using this time round.
Yeah, so we have a relatively standard Frostlass composition. It is Dual Mega with the Delphox, interestingly enough. It has Encore, which is pretty interesting because we've seen this as a best of 1 ladder tech, mostly to catch opponents off guard, like catching Aegislash, going for King's Shield in that matchup, instead of having something like Substitute or Nasty Plot. The Basculation actually has Focus Sash. We've seen a lot of the ones that aren't Choice Scarf use something like a Citrus Berry or even Mystic Water at times. The Sneasler is actually Poison Jab. It's not Dire Claw, so we don't have to really worry about too much status there. Instead, pretty standard with Protect and White Herb. This Garchomp here, Citrus Berry, pretty standard bulky set, chooses to forego Stomping Tantrum, so we'll have to rely on the Delphox next to it or a Protect to use ground moves. The Kingambit actually chooses to forego Iron Head for both Kowtow, Cleave, and Sucker Punch, as well as using Low Kick as a coverage option to hit things like Incineroar, and uses Trouble Berry to help better combat Sneasler and other fighting types. And the Frostlass rounds out the moveset with Substitute instead of the more conventional Aurora Veil to help increase the bulk of the team that you would typically see on a team that has something like a Citrus Berry Garchomp.
So I think this makes sense for, especially if you're, say, locking a Kingambit into something like Sucker Punch. You want ways to be able to deal with that a little bit more effectively. And I think, going back to your point on Delphox, the Encore is really although it can be a best of 1 ladder tech, the amount of positive pressure that it puts on your opponents to not play defensively, to have to think, hey, hang on a second, can I protect and switch? Can I reposition myself or not, as the case may be? So I think it provides that different kind of team sheet pressure coming from the Delphox. So I really like that. Let's have a look on the other side. Let's see what Justin's going to be running against Sanvi here. And no surprises, I think, that Justin is bringing a Tyranitar. I think he's pretty well known for liking that kind of big, bulky Pokemon. He used it in the NBL Draft League recently as well. It was in his draft. So he's very, very comfortable with this Pokemon. He's got a much, much better in Champions. And certainly supporting the Garchomp and the Corviknight and Sinistcha. That core is actually really quite difficult to break through.
Yeah, it's actually really interesting here because you would look at most of this team and think, oh, this is something that I would expect Justin to play. And then you look at the Corviknight, and Corviknight isn't really a Justin Tang kind of Pokemon, if you think about it. Even the Rotom has electric terrain, which is a crazy tech, right? So it's not really a conventional Justin Tang style team, but it has some interesting twists to, I guess, maybe keep up with the evolution of this metagame, and particularly building for the sake of this particular match.
It's like Corviknight's not quite the Regidrago that might be, otherwise in that slot. If you were going to see Justin use something that's like pretty fast, pretty offensive, maybe you have to position it really well to make the most out of it. But Justin's a great battler. So we've just got the clarification actually that this is electro web rather than electric terrain. So especially with the sleep mechanic change that came in Pokemon Champions, where it's one less turn overall. Electric terrain a little bit less valuable, and electro web makes much more sense than that.
Yes. In terms of the movesets, most of these movesets are very standard. Electro web, of course, is a little bit interesting, providing speed control for going Will-O-Wisp. I think that if you burn your Machagachas, then I guess you don't really need Will-O-Wisp, right? The Sneasler having Throat Chop helps cover for something like Aegislash. That gives you better options for hitting those ghost types that otherwise trouble your poison fighting coverage. And sometimes you see Corviknight running Iron Defense and Body Press, or even Bulk Up, but this Corviknight is running none of those and is just sticking with Brave Bird and Iron Head to better deal with grass types that trouble the Sand Mode and hit fairy types like Floette. And then rounding out the set with Tailwind and Roost, just serving there as an offensive support for the rest of the team, and particularly bolstering the Sand Mode.
So I think this does make the Corviknight a little bit more of a Justin Tangmon, in as much that it's there to remove threats, not to sit on the field for 6 turns and get itself boosted up and then try to play on the offensive a little bit later on. Justin likes to go on the offensive early doors. It'd be interesting to see how this kind of plays out between these two trainers, because Sanvi's a little bit more of a defensive trainer in the way that he plays. He's quite precise in the way that he likes to position his team. So let's see how we get on. We've got Rotom and Corviknight coming out to Justin here. Frostlass and Sneasler for Sanvi.
Yeah, I mean, to start off, I really like Justin's position. I mean, it's really hard to break this Corviknight instantly. And this Rotom does have Volt Switch, so you could Volt Switch into whatever you like as you set Tailwind, right? And this Corviknight also has the option to Brave Bird the Sneasler, Iron Head the Frostlass. There's a lot of immediate damage coming out. And this Frostlass doesn't have a Rotoville either, so the damage mitigation is very limited. Sure, Substitute is going to take a hit more comfortably, but you're not actually progressing the game state on Sanvi's end, right? And so this Corviknight starts to present itself as a huge problem immediately on turn 1. Of course, you can double up and remove the Rotom, but you are just leaving the Corviknight there. And most Corviknight you can ignore, but this set in particular, you can't really just leave there because it will deal a lot of damage.
Yeah, that's the real gambit that these players have got to make in this spot. I mean, there is Fake Out available as well, but also, more importantly, if the Sneasler is a target, you can protect itself. Frostlass is very well known, certainly in its Mega form, to be doing quite a lot of damage with Blizzard. If this, as it looks like, is a little bit more of an offensive Corviknight, then actually the Blizzard doing quite a lot of damage really sets up Sanvi's board to start actually going on the offensive without having to make those sort of trades. As Volt Switch gets the Rotom out of there, and something we didn't get a chance to talk about is the opportunity for one, this Scarf Garchomp to come back in and start pressuring down the Frostlass and the Sneasler. But two, you kind of presume in this sort of matchup that Tyranitar is also in the back, and Justin had an option to switch back into it.
Yeah, I mean, the Garchomp coming in here in a solid spot to threaten this Sneasler as well, so that the Corviknight doesn't have to worry about taking that much Brave Bird recoil. Its HP really mattering here because it doesn't have a healing item like Citrus Berry. It has Aqua Berry instead, which helps match up better into the Delphox. But we see Sanvi switching the Garchomp here to cover for this Earthquake. Won't take too much damage, but of course, already threatening a 3-hit KO, not considering the Citrus Berry, and that Iron Head is going to cleanly finish off this Frostlass.
Yeah, really great switch here actually, because even if the Tailwind didn't go up, the combination of the two attacks is enough to pick up the Frostlass. But you don't have to if you've got the Tailwind up, so Justin really setting up this offensive board that we were talking about and trying to push through Sanvi's team as quickly as possible.
Yeah, exactly. After Justin sets up that Tailwind there and gets into this Garchomp, there's really not much on Sanvi's team that can take the combination of Earthquake and Brave Bird. Of course, you did leave that Delphox that has Levitate in its Mega form at home for this Frostlass. And so everything here is going to struggle to take that combination.
Okay, Tyranitar coming in to remove the snow, get some sand going on the field, but I think more importantly to pressure this Basculegion that's going on the defensive this turn round. Doesn't want to take those big attacks, or the combination of attacks from Garchomp and Corviknight. Justin takes the opportunity to get a little bit of health recovery with a Roost, so recovers all that damage that Sanvi spent time doing with the Frostlass, and now after this Basculegion protects, it's in a real tough spot in front of the Tyranitar.
Yeah, I really want to highlight that turn actually. Justin does three very important things all in one. One, Justin makes a proactive switch to threaten the Basculegion instantly with this Tyranitar. Two, preserves his Garchomp. And three, puts his Corviknight in an amazing position because he knows that he can't take the KO on this Garchomp through Citrus Berry with a combination of Earthquake and Brave Bird. Or at least presuming that there's a chance it doesn't take the KO, and even then you put yourself in a more compromising position and boost last respects on this Basculegion. And so Justin says, well, I'm not going to take a KO yet, or I'm not going to put myself too low on HP, and I'll just bring in my Tyranitar to better position my Garchomp for later in the game.
Now that does open the opportunity for Sneasler to do some really nice things in a couple of turns when the Tailwind ends. The question I've got is whether or not this Sneasler even gets through the turn. The double up of Knockoff and Brave Bird into that slot actually seems pretty dangerous. But Justin making the read here, going into the Garchomp instead. Now that's going to knock off the Citrus Berry and remove any recovery. It's just a Brave Bird into this Sneasler. Clean knockout in one. And Justin really is securing a great foothold in this game. With a combination of all four of his Pokemon against the two Pokemon that Sanvi has remaining.
Yeah, so I think that play from Justin is wonderful there. He just knows that, it looks like a flashy read to some extent, but it really just covers everything. If the Basculegion switches out, the Sneasler will drop to the Brave Bird. If it stays in, it's going to take a lot of damage, putting it in Earthquake range from this Choice Scarf Garchomp in the back. And of course, Sanvi doesn't have any speed control. And this Basculegion is not Choice Scarf, and the Garchomp is. And so everything at this point with this chip damage will just drop to Earthquake. And of course, it's either you don't take a KO on the Basculegion and it switches out, or you get a lot of damage on it and put it into Earthquake range for following turns. And so from here, there's really nothing Sanvi can do to stop the inevitable Earthquake from Choice Scarf Garchomp sweeping the rest of his team.
Well, there was a rock slide, and you know what they say, where there's a rock slide, there's a way. Unfortunately, in this case, the Tyranitar did get to knock off the Basculegion. The sand coming in actually pretty crucial for removing the removing the Focus Sash from play and allowing that one-hit KO as well. Even one last respect in an endgame, especially if it can get used for free over and over again can be enough to 1v3 an opponent. I don't think Sanvi was in that position, but all of those things adding up to really a very, very well executed game by Justin.
Yeah, that was as clean as it gets, really, right? Super clean gameplay, got into the right positions, threatened all the damage you needed to. There's really not too much more to say than we already have, honestly, right? Like, just was able to get into the right positions with Garchomp early, brought the Tyranitar out to preserve the Garchomp for later, distributed damage in all the right places, and I mean, he really made the Frostlass do pretty much nothing, right? Like, it just really didn't get a lot of value. Once the Garchomp came in, like, you're threatening Earthquake and Iron Head for a ton of damage into it, and there's really not much that could switch in either on Sanvi's end. I mean, there was no King Gambit to switch in, or there's no Mega Delphox to immediately threaten that board. So we'll see how Sanvi adjusts going forward.
Yeah, so like, I think one of the big things is if you don't bring your own speed control or any form of speed control, you don't have too much speed control on your team. Removing that Corviknight early is absolutely paramount to having any sort of success in this matchup. And the Delphox switch up, bringing that in early, looks great for Sanvi, at least as a switch up. But now you've got decisions to make, right? You know that the Corviknight cannot protect itself, so a Heat Wave's looking pretty nice, maybe follow up by a close combat, but then you're opening his Delphox up to getting attacked for big damage as well. And so, even if Justin doesn't switch out the Corviknight, it's got the Ockerberry and should be able to take a couple of attacks there too.
Yeah, I mean, you would traditionally think that this is a nice position for Sanvi to just go for Heat Wave and close combat into both targets, but with the Ockerberry here on the Corviknight, it makes it a lot more awkward in terms of removing it, as we see the close combat not pick up the KO on Corviknight
there it is.
Due to the Ockerberry, and so that's going to bring a lot of problems for Sanvi here, as Hydro Pump also connects on the Delphox for a clean one-hit KO.
That's a big hit.
Yeah, we see a lot of Rotom actually not trained offensively enough to take a KO like that, but here Justin kind of buying into this Tailwind offense, wants this Rotom to be more offensive. Of course, there is no Will-O-Wisp one that you have 3 attacks and protect, so it should be taking KOs like that. And now Justin is in a phenomenal spot, having removed the Delphox. You have the Corviknight in Tailwind. The Sneasler does not have it does have Unburden, so it can actually threaten this Corviknight.
Yeah, that's
Tailwind, which is interesting, right? So it can't immediately just roost off healing and get itself into an amazing spot, but you still have to deal with this Rotom as well.
But this is the thing. It's like this is the speed control that Sanvi has access to. It's like, well, Sneezer's kind of fast. Now it's super fast and can actually put pressure on in the Tailwind environment for Justin's side. But you're almost forced to attack into this Corviknight on this turn, right? Because if you don't, and Justin just swings with the Corviknight, your Sneasler's gone, and then you just lost too much ground. And so this close combat, pretty telegraphed. There's no reason for Justin to switch out there or do anything else. You've got to kind of keep your opponent honest in a lot of situations like this. But the Rotom now gets the opportunity to put some speed control down on the board, break the Focus Sash on the Basculegion with an Electro Web, and now it did already the Garchomp in the back outspeed everything before, but this Rotom's putting everything in a position where enough damage has been distributed and everything's in range of it.
Yeah, that's another great turn for Justin. Of course, I mean, he knows that the Corviknight can't really switch out if you have Garchomp and Tyranitar in the back with this Unburdened Sneasler. Yes, you do have Choice Scarf and Tailwind out, but there's no reason to take damage on your win condition with this Garchomp. This Rotom here actually going for Electro Web instead of something like Thunderbolt or Hydro Pump. Sorry, it has Volt Switch, not Thunderbolt. And so Electro Web there, very good for hitting the Basculegion and not switching out into the Tyranitar like Sanvi expected. And there's a forfeit, right? I mean, there's nothing you can really do from there.
Fair enough.
The Garchomp's in an amazing spot to just continue to use Earthquake just like last game, and there's really no switch into the combination of attacks now that the Delphox is gone. and would get KO'd by Hydropump, as we saw at the start of that game too anyway. And that brings Team Z's score to 5 wins and Il Server at 3 still. And in the meantime, we had Mirai and Vax play, and Mirai ended up winning 2-1 there as well. So that would bring the total to 6-3.
Okay.
So it's looking like Il Server is going to have to do a bit of catch up here as we start to get close to game points.
Yeah, it's just for everybody watching, for your benefit, we're not going to be able to stream every single match in this friendly. There's too many matches to how much time we've got to stream. So we are revealing a match after another match after every match that's played. So obviously we had Justin versus Sanvi and Vax versus Mirai revealed. We'll have 2 more revealed after the next match. But yeah, I think going back to the match that we've just watched, absolute textbook really in terms of the matchup. And I think it's got to be said that Sanvi adjusted the correct way to give himself a good opportunity. But I think this is the way that Justin's trained his Pokemon, the Corviknight, like probably pretty offensive and pretty bulky to take those sort of combinations of attacks, and be able to set up the Tailwind, because the Tailwind is so important for what Justin wants to be able to do with the team. And you know, you think, well, maybe that's a reason for Flamethrower or Overheat on the Delphox, right? But Encore also does a lot of work in certain matchups. It's just it just wasn't this one, unfortunately for Sanvi.
Yeah, I think there Justin just had a pretty good matchup and did all of the right things and made all the right plays, right? I mean, it never really felt like there was much opportunity for Sanvi to kind of capitalize on anything, and so Justin just gave no room for Sanvi to get back into the game. Just got the Garchomp in the right places. Once there was no Froslass to threaten it or no Basket Legion to KO it with this Last Respect, and just a really textbook game with Tailwind offense.
You know, I think the only thing that I would critique Justin on in that game is actually having Rough Skin Garchomp instead of Sandvale. Personally, I just like rolling the dice, but maybe that's just a me thing. Yeah, nothing to comment on really further than what we've already said is there. So let's get on to our match 2 for this friendly between Il Server and Team Z. Stecca versus Slushy 2K next, and Stecca's team's looking pretty standard as far as they go in the metagame that we've got established so far. So this faster mode of Aerodactyl and Sneasler, Aerodactyl being one of the most common Tailwind setters out there at the moment. Mega Floette in contention, if not the most powerful Mega that we have access to in this metagame. And all of the nice, good, solid support pieces, Incineroar, Sinistra, and King Gambit around it.
Yeah, I think that it's really nice to feature Stecca here, kind of revered as one of the very strong Italian players, but just never really had his moment to shine until winning Birmingham this season. That was his big moment, is that he's been working towards for a long time, and he's kind of gained this reputation as one of these really strong control players, particularly with like Calm Mind setups or Nasty Blood setups, using Incineroar and support pieces with redirection, like the Sinistra has with Rage Powder. And so this is kind of his go-to for his play style. I mean, when you would think of what Stecca would play, I would imagine that this comes to mind. Really strong team, of course, but interesting to see the black glasses on the King Gambit here, and opting for Iron Head, no low kick or Swords Dance, which you sometimes actually see with these Mega Floette teams, where you can get a Calm Mind up and then get Swords Dance King Gambit next to it, and then all of a sudden you have 2 threats, right? And so that's the golden position, but very hard to set up. And the Aerodactyl and the Sneasler here are very standard sets, nothing crazy here, both Focus Sash and White Herb respectively. And interestingly enough, the Incineroar has Shuka Berry, which can help the ever so popular Garchomp. Helps this team position around it a lot better, considering you really only have one immunity and one resistance with the Aerodactyl and the Sinistcha. But everything else takes a lot of damage from it, so if you get out of position against Garchomp, you can just stay in with Incineroar and use Parting Shot. And you don't really need as much healing from something like a Citrus Berry because you have the Sinistcha with Hospitality to help keep this team alive. And also you're playing mostly through this Floette mode, so you're mostly wanting to support the Floette instead of try and keep your other pieces around. That's mostly situational. So yeah, very, very standard Calm Mind, textbook Calm Mind Floette team, with a nice tech here on the Incineroar.
I think the black glasses is really important for making sure you actually get the KO on Basculegion. Some of them are training now to not be knocked out by a max attack invested King Gambit, just so that they can get that last respects off in an end game, and shutting that mode off is really, really nice to see. Now Slushy using, again, it's like it's relatively standard with a little bit more of a different take on how to use Floette Eternal certainly in its mega form. Having support of Whimsicott and Farigiraf, and Farigiraf obviously being very, very strong in being able to remove fake out pressure from your side of the field, but also the Psychic as coverage option, knocking out Sneasler in one, doesn't really hurt its case either, certainly in this format. And paired with Basculegions, you're turning off the ability for Sucker Punch to affect it. So, you've got a little bit more reliance on some of the other factors of the team, and then you've got this Floette with Light of Ruin, which is its signature move, and you trade half of your hit points for a insanely powerful fairy type move that not many Pokemon, even the ones that resist it, can really take very comfortably.
Yeah, exactly. In terms of the overall team, I mean, this is something that is a little bit off of, I think, what Slushy would normally play. I mean, of course, I think that he's kind of renowned as a more aggressive player, of course, but a lot of his teams recently, especially now that he's been on this crazy tear of regional top cuts, have featured kind of this aggressive, bulky offense instead of this hyper offense that he's become so well known for. And so we'll see this interesting clash of playstyles between this really slow defensive control style and this more aggressive, proactive, in-your-face damage dealing style here from Slushy. And these movesets are pretty standard. The Lumberry and the Garchomp is an interesting shout. This helps you combat things like Will-O-Wisp from Rotom Wash, able to just stay in and Dragon Claw, and you trade super well into it. Of course, Hydro Pump only really 2 KOs you if it's an offensive set as well. So Lumberry there, really good for controlling Rotom Wash. The Citrus Berry Farigiraf, standard support set, actually carrying Hyper Voice here for a dual attack set instead of something more supportive. The Basculegion is Choice Scarf with a standard moveset. The Sneasler having Feint is very interesting to help set up combos, especially with this Floette. Makes your Light of Ruin even more threatening, right? And the Fake Tears and the Whimsicott, I think, is the move to look out for on that set, because you see a lot of situations where Moonblast and Dazzling Gleam are a little short of picking up KOs or just might need that extra damage, and Fake Tears makes it so that you're taking KOs that just shouldn't be possible within the scope of like what this game is allowing, right? And so Fake Tears really sets up that Floette. Of course, the rest of this team is mostly physical, so you're really only combining with the Floette on that Fake Tears, as the Farigiraf doesn't really have a lot of opportunities for that, considering that it's not offensive, right? It
depends. If the Farigiraf is trained to be pretty offensive, then maybe you start thinking about maybe getting some 2-hit KOs, some good ones, but I think it's really situational there. Should we move our way into the battle? Let's see how this gets unfolded between these two trainers, because I feel like we're going to be getting a little bit of a longer match than we just featured between Justin and Sanvi. So let's get this started. And we're going to be leading off with Basculegion and Sneasler for Slushy, and Stecca with Aerodactyl and Sneasler.
Yeah, I mean, off the bat here, you have to like Slushy's position here with the Basculegion. With this choice scarf, can freely flip turn off of both targets into whatever you so choose, right? The Sneasler here is kind of caught in an awkward position. Of course, can hit the Aerodactyl for good damage as well, but this dual wing beat is also very threatening and is faster, right? And so there's a lot to consider there. So while the Basculegion is in a great spot, you really can't freely target the Aerodactyl down with your own Sneasler. And I would argue that Stecca has an opportunity to get this Unburden boost on his own Sneasler here and get it in a much more threatening position on the following turn.
Okay, Sinister coming in, so kind of trading the hospitality for just that bit of redirection on turn one. Maybe expecting Slushy to lock into either a flip turn or a wave crash, maybe, to try to knock out the Sneasler this turn. And then be able to redirect it next turn, as you say, to try to get that White Herb Unburden boost started going. As it turns out, flip turn into the Sinister just allows the Basculegion to go back to Slushy, and for Slushy to reposition with whatever he chooses to bring out. The Farigiraf, in fact, is the Pokemon of choice, so putting a different kind of pressure on Sneasler on Stecca's side.
Yeah, I actually really like that play. You would obviously conventionally see Fake Out used to flinch the target, but here it was actually used to damage the target strictly, trying to chip the Focus Sash away from the Aerodactyl and finish it off with a flip turn before it can even move. But Stecca is prepared for this, saying, okay, well, I don't really need Sinister in this position for the hospitality specifically. I just need it as a defensive switch in to help leverage this Basculegion and get it off the field because flip turn feels so obvious, right? And so, great play from both ends there. The close combat here into Stecca's Sneasler does a lot of damage, threatening this 2-hit KO. It does activate the White Herb, so Slushy now has the Unburden, as Stecca also follows suit and goes for close combat into the Farigiraf, dealing a significant amount of damage with a critical hit. You've got to think that without that Citrus Berry there, a Machagacha might have been able to pick up the KO.
Yeah.
But I mean, you really don't like to see that if you're Slushy, right? That critical hit is rough.
And I'm always waiting. I'm always hesitating, especially when I'm playing here after Machagacha. Like, okay, we've seen both of them are going to be hitting their mark, but is there going to be a burn? None for Stecca. I'm sure Slushy was very happy to see that on that turn. It looked like, I mean, obviously Slushy's was able to close combat first with their Sneasler, so
yes.
It could be that it's a speed tie, but it could be that Slushy's Sneasler is trained to be that little bit faster than Stecca's, and so now you're telegraphing the Rage Powder plays between the Sinister and the Sneasler on Stecca's side. It's like, well, do you allow your Sinister to take all of this damage so that your Sneasler can get that last attack off, get that second close combat into the Farigiraf to try to knock it out this turn? And especially, are you going to risk it when you know that there's a Basculegion in the back that can switch straight in?
Yeah, so Slushy actually calling this turn and going for the Dire Claw into the Sinistra instead, and this double target is actually going to fail to pick up the knockout because of that Citrus Berry killing just enough. And I mean, great play, but just not enough damage on the board considering Farigiraf just isn't the strongest Pokemon, and Sinistra of course has a ton of bulk to work with. They're able to set up the Trick Room and get Floette into a nice position.
You saw the interaction as well, though, right? The Flower Veil activating on the Floette on the switch in.
Yes.
Stopped the Diaclaw from getting a status on the Sinistra as well. So that switch did quite a lot of things. But now with Floette in position, it can go for its Mega Evolution, really start to put some damage on the field. I'm not sure that the Dazzling Gleam is enough to pick up the KO on the Sneasler, but you have got Rage Powder available with the Sinistra, and so Stecca is in a really strong position to start really taking advantage of this Trick Room setup.
Yeah, I mean, you have to imagine that this is very streamlined for Stecca up until like beyond this point. I mean, they're just using fairy attacks, so you have too much bulk and HP to work with for now. I mean, Slushy just has to kind of sit here and accept that the Sneasler will be dropping to this Moonblast. You really don't want to be switching in on Floette unless you have real resistances, and of course, Poison Fighting doesn't resist that. I mean, Sneasler there just doesn't really have the opportunity to be preserved for later in the game, and so Slushy just opts, well, I'm just going to let Sneasler go down, get into a better position, and every KO that your opponent takes positions your Basculation better with Last Respect. So it's really all not bad, right? Like, you're making progress even when you're getting knocked out, and so Slushy actually brings in his own Floette here, which, I mean, if you can't beat him, join him, right? So,
and also I'm kind of wondering, like, I haven't seen the interaction. I haven't played a lot of Mega Floette. Does Light of Ruin knock out Mega Floette?
I think it depends on how it's trained. Bulky ones should eat it guaranteed, but really offensive ones I think can just knock out the ones with no bulk. And so I think from Slushy's end, you would have to just assume, like, well, is the Light of Ruin even worth it, right? Because you could just say, well, if Hyper Voice Dazzling picks up this Aerodactyl and gives me a 2k on the Floette, sure, I'm losing for Rigorath this turn, then I can just pick it up the following turn when Trick Room is still active, right? And so you have to think, is the Light of Ruin actually worth committing to? Because you would take so much damage in return and then drop to the Floette's incoming Moonblast. So you see a Psychic coming out into the Aerodactyl, which does a little under half, and the Dazzling does pick up the Farigiraf. And you have to assume that this is an incoming Dazzling Gleam. It is actually a Light of Ruin. Okay.
Big Light of Ruin there.
It does connect.
Straight into the
Floette. Oh, accurate. And gets the
100% damage there. Wow. Wow, that is a big KO. And knowing that the Floette is living on just under half puts you in an okay position, except if the Aerodactyl gets to land a move and goes for its 90% accurate. Either Rock Slide or Dual Wing Beat, in this case Dual Wing Beat, and knock out that remaining little bit of damage.
Yeah, I suppose Slushy may not have been confident in a double up like Hyper Voice and Moonblast, or Psychic and Moonblast, trying to get the knockout there, and just says, well, I need to remove it now and get my Basculation into an endgame that it can manage. And so now Basculation actually presents a number of problems for Stecca, where you can't actually remove it instantly because the Sneasler does not have access to Throat Chop, right? And so this Aerodactyl is also stuck using Rock Slide or Dual Wing Beats to deal with its Basculation, and like here you would just get knocked out by Last Respects on both targets. So the Aerodactyl is actually going to choose to protect here. Stecca's trying to leverage this and force a KO in that direction, but we see the Aqua Jet not picking up the KO and the Dire Claw coming through, putting the Basculation to sleep. And so, yeah, I mean, Slushy getting the read right there, targeting the Sneasler instead of the Aerodactyl, assuming the protect, and I mean that sleep just completely changes the way this endgame plays out.
Yeah, especially since the Aqua Jet went before the Dire Claw, so this is a guaranteed turn of sleep. This is an extra turn that Stecca has available to just go on the offensive. And hey, look, you know what? We've all been in those spots where we need a Dire Claw bailout in this format so far, right? And you know, you've got to go for it in the moment. That's why you don't drop it, or at least one of the reasons not to drop it, instead of playing something like Poison Shot, Poison Jab, or Gunk Shot, right? Just to have that opportunity in the moment. Even a Paralysis would have been pretty useful there, even if for the lower opportunity, but still an opportunity for the Basculation not to move in that endgame.
Yeah, I mean, you have to think that Slushy there is thinking, well, I don't think I did anything wrong, right? Like, I brought the Pokemon I need to in this matchup, and I did kind of all the right things, and the game said no, I guess, right? And so there, even getting the read right, assuming the protect, I mean, you have to think, well, if you're reading it anyway, would you not lock into Last Respects? I think that might have been the last turn of Trick Room, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I
so
think
I guess
so.
just
I think
saying
so.
there, I guess the idea is you lock into Aqua Jet anyway. You say, well, with Trick Room expiring, I'll move first the next turn regardless. If I'm getting the read right, if I don't KO the Sneasler, well, I'm hitting the Aerodactyl the next turn regardless, and covering for the Aerodactyl, attacking with Rock Slide, and just saying I'm not going to flinch either.
Well,
so
and
I think
also
that's the correct play,
the Diaclaw
sure.
too, right? Is trying to knock out the Sneasler before the Diaclaw does the thing that the Diaclaw just did. So
yeah,
I think it's pretty reasonable. I was looking at it thinking the Aqua Jet wouldn't pick up the KO there, but you kind of understand it for the reasons that you said as well for why you'd pick Aqua Jet over the moves that definitely would pick up the KO, right? But
I mean, you'd have to imagine that this Sneasler from Stecca's end is actually relatively bulky, and so maybe the Aqua Jet would normally KO against a Sneasler that is just fully dedicated to offense. But on this team, I think it's not very surprising to see it be trained with a lot of defense investment, and so I would think that would normally pick up the KO on Sneasler that doesn't have any bulk. But I'd imagine that Stecca is using some, and so Aqua Jet there maybe expecting the KO and it just falls short. After getting the read, I mean, that sucks, right?
Because the close combat exchange between the two Sneaslers, the close combat did quite a lot of damage, right? And
yes.
Maybe a little bit less on Stecca's side than on Slushy's, but that could have been how the Sneasler on Slushy's side was trained as well, right? So it's hard to really make a judgment, but I do think that Sneasler typically will run a little bit of bulk anyway since it doesn't necessarily have to be as fast as possible. But let's get into game 2. Let's see how this game plays out and what adjustments these trainers could make, because as you rightly said, Slushy probably not necessarily feeling like he did anything necessarily wrong in that match, and this matchup does seem to be definitely based on the choices that these trainers make.
Yeah, so to start off, we actually have Basket Legion joined by the Whimsicott this time around. The Whimsicott here, not really in a great spot. You have to imagine that Slushy's idea was to try and get Tailwind up early because Stecca did not have the Sinistcha on the field on turn 1, and so now this Trick Room threat is kind of imminent, right? It's immediate, and you have to respect it instantly. And so this Whimsicott's kind of in a compromising position. Doesn't really have a lot to offer. Can't really combine with anything using the fake tears at the moment, and you don't have any Encore pressure as well, right? And so this Whimsicott can't protect, so it either has to switch or just trade with Moonblast, which isn't the strongest of attacks. And so we see Slushy actually opt for a Wave Crash instantly to KO the Sneasler instead.
Yeah, so quick KO there because you don't necessarily want to protect the Sneasler in front of an Encore Whimsicott. The Moonblast taking some chip damage into the Sinistcha. I'm interested to see if this is going to be Trick Room or just a match gotcha, but yeah, Trick Room, the move of choice there for Stecca. I think Stecca's deciding is like, hey, you know what? If you don't knock out the Sneasler this turn, then I'm gonna either Diaclaw the Whimsicott, do a bunch of damage, and otherwise you're allowing me this free switch into King Gambit, which really doesn't care too much about Whimsicott at all, and can really go on the offensive against the other slot, being Basket Legion, could be a Floette, could be a Garchomp. All of those options, I think. Stecca would be pretty happy to see and be pretty happy to be attacking down into.
Yeah, I don't think we've seen a more welcoming position for King Gambit all series long between these two groups of players. You're staring down a Basket Legion that is Choice Scarf and a Whimsicott that does not have Protect, and you do have Iron Head and Catsuck Cleave on this moveset. Yeah. So it's kind of free reign for what this King Gambit chooses to do. And it's kind of the onus is on Slushy to react to this and play accordingly.
Okay, so this is the opportunity for Stecca to get their Floette out onto the field, and I think this makes sense from Slushy's side. Start to prepare at least one Pokemon on Stecca's side to be a little bit more threatened by a Frigoraph in the back, because I think that's the only Pokemon that can really come in here and actually actively put on some offensive pressure. Otherwise, you're bringing in a Sneasler, which maybe can get one turn of Fake Out, or a Garchomp that can get double down onto, or either a Floette that can get double down onto as well. And certainly after that Fake Tears, this Floette that switched in is probably not liking the look of the Floette on the other side.
Yeah, I mean, you have to imagine that Slushy's play on turn 1 of just going for the Wave Crash and thinking, well, I'm not dealing damage with last respect to 50 base power, and Flip Turn doesn't really like help my position more. Just going for the KO there kind of was under the assumption that Kingambit wasn't in the back, and now that it is, Slushy just has no real options to stall out this Trick Room, and the Kingambit plus the Floette here just exerting so much damage.
Okay, so I think Slushy's realizing very quickly that they have to find a way to get through this Trick Room as unscathed as possible and try to leverage whatever resource that they have in the back afterwards. But it's going to be really hard when a Floette starts to go for its Mega Evolution and start dishing out big damage. Now, this 2+ Moonblast, or Moonblast into 2- Floette, actually does quite a lot of damage with the Fairy Aura in play as well. So that's nice. The question is it enough?
Yeah, I mean, here on Slushy's end, you have to assume that you might actually be trying to angle for switching the Floette out and then trying to protect both Pokemon if your Pokemon in the back can even take a double target, which I'd imagine not, considering everything that is on his end. But there you would just be angling for a triple protect otherwise. And you see the Encore here actually into the Floettes, which is interesting. I mean, you have to assume that you're just losing the Whimsy Pad here to a Dazzling Gleam. So yeah, I mean, the Iron Head is not going to pick up the KO on its own, but this Dazzling Gleam will certainly do that. The idea behind encoring the Dazzling Gleam here is that you don't have to worry about taking Moonblast on your Floettes after Tripping is over. But this Kingambit will only drop to a Moonblast critical hit or the Light of Ruin, and so you're just taking too much damage at this point. And there's really nothing that you can do after you protect this last turn of Trick Room, because you are the faster Floette out of Trick Room. You do have an opportunity to attack, but there's just too much damage on Stecca's end.
I was about to say the rough skin damage on the Kingambit might put it in range of a really offensive Moonblast from this Floette on Slushy's side, but not if Stecca sees that coming and just brings in the Sinistcha instead. Now the Sinistcha out of Trick Room can just redirect any attacks away from the Kingambit, the Light of Ruin, the Moonblast, whatever, and even if the Iron Head doesn't KO because this Floette is trained to be really bulky, a Sucker Punch follow-up will be enough to pick that KO up on. Free Fairy attacks and Protect doesn't allow this Floette really a lot of room to breathe in this situation.
Exactly. No room really in the end game for Slushy to do much with this Floette. I mean, here, getting into Sinistcha on that timing means that you can always Rage Powder away something like the Moonblast or the Light of Ruin. And even if the Kingambit were to drop there on the last turn of Trick Room and Iron Head doesn't pick up the KO, you just simply bring in Floette, Rage Powder, and Moonblast. Here you even have the option to Trick Room if you really want to, but I wouldn't risk that. Rage Powder and Iron Head here is a very safe play to make, and kind of leaves Slushy with no options but to take an Iron Head here.
Okay, so here's the Moonblast knocking out the Sinistcha, so it's always nice to me sometimes watching a Sinistcha getting knocked out, because it's kind of difficult to do, but here's the Iron Head going down into the Floette. A critical hit just to add insult to injury, and Stecca takes this game 2-0. And again, just like our first match, although this matchup was maybe a little bit more even in terms of how it was set up overall, actually Stecca finding a really clean way to be able to navigate their way through it.
Yeah, I mean, that was actually really interesting. We didn't really see the Floette after Calm Mind in that match. It was just more immediate damage, and I think that was absolutely the correct call, identifying that, hey, Slushy's team doesn't really have that much bulk into Floette, right? It's mostly just damage trading straight up, and the Calm Mind would just give more opportunities for attacks to come through. And at that point, you're just taking too much damage over time to where this Basque Legion in the late game can, get this Lacer's X off, or this Light of Ruin would just knock you out if you get chipped too much. And I think that was absolutely the correct way to play it. A great adjustment from game one after the, I guess, relatively fortunate Dire Claw status, sleeping the Basque Legion, but the absolute correct adjustment for game two to comfortably and I guess commandingly to win with this King Gambit and Floette duo under Trick Room.
So we have our next result in Stecca 2 versus Slushy 0. That brings it to 4 versus 6. And now we're revealing Dynamo versus Sempra. That was a 1-2 in favor of Sempra. So that brings Team Z to 7 wins versus Il Server's 4. So if I'm not mistaken, this means that now Il Server is praying more for pride than to be able to win this set outright. And Team Z looks like they've taken it out.
Yeah, there can still be a draw that happens here with 3 matches left.
Oh yeah, I can't add up.
As it is 4 to 7, but this means that Team Z has locked in a draw at the very least, and so we have 3 matches left here with Clippers Lobo Peep, Torviv Marcafiero, and Darts and Pepe, which will be our next match here. Pepe recently actually made it all the way to the top cut of the World Championships this past year with Caloric Shadow Rider and Zamazenta, which isn't even listed here. That's how long his achievements go back. I think really bursted onto the scene with that 2018 Stuttgart Regionals win with the Latias, right, and the Mega Gengar, if I'm not mistaken. So kind of surprising not to see a Mega Gengar here, kind of as a callback to that playstyle all those years ago, but instead is opting for a dual Mega with Floette and Tyranitar instead, and the leftover setup combo that you would normally see on those Gengar teams now is actually with completely different Mega Evolutions. To round out the team, you have a Sinistra, very standard moveset here with Life Dew to help support the Calm Mind and Clanger Soul setups even further, and Aegislash with Spell Tag, and the Poltergeist Ironhead Shadow Sneak set on the physical end that distributes so much damage and is able to take so many neutral KOs on non-bulky targets. And this Incineroar actually opts for the Chople Berry on a standard moveset that helps it match up better into things like White Herb Sneasler, so you can comfortably stay in and use Parting Shot on them, which this team otherwise has relatively difficult time with, considering your 2 Mega Evolutions both being weak to Sneasler. And so having extra control there with this Incineroar and Sinistra duo to control Sneaslers, very, very strong to support those two to get in the right positions.
Yes, Pepe's actually a member of the UK community, so I've played against him a few times in locals, not as well, and he's not a fun opponent to be on the receiving end of. I can say that from personal experience, and certainly his world champion runs and world championship runs and various other regional and international runs are very much testament to that. Let's get over to his opponent here, Darts, playing again another Mega Floette team. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised at this point that there's quite a few of these teams that are featuring Mega Floette, given how strong it is overall. We've got another Light of Ruin one here that Darts is going to be running with a Tailwind Talonflame. So very, very immediate pressure right off the bat. Take out a threat that you don't really want to see while you're in Tailwind, then let the rest of your Pokemon speak for themselves. You've got another physical Aegislash here, but instead of an Iron Head, it's a Sacred Sword. And certainly a choice that you've got to make is whether or not that you want to be strong or weak against opposing King Gambit. And Darts making a lot of choices like the low kick on the King Gambit, the Sacred Sword and the Aegislash, just having Garchomp in your team in general just really puts you on the front foot against threats like King Gambit, certainly from Team Preview.
Yeah, the movesets here are mostly standard outside of the two from Aegislash and Kingambit, these two steel types. This Aegislash is a very interesting set with White Herb, with Poltergeist, Shadow Sneak, Sacred Sword, King's Shield. You would think that White Herb might actually allow you to run close combat instead of Sacred Sword here on the Aegislash, which would be pretty interesting, but just saying that it's there for Instant or Intimidate instead of covering for your drops. And just wants to stick with Sacred Sword to deal with threats like Corviknight or other defense boosting Pokemon that gives you consistent damage into it. And the Kingambit here actually foregoing Kowtow Cleave for the Iron Head and Low Kick coverage options. And this is something that we've seen from some ladder players recently, where a lot of players have been dropping the Kowtow Cleave for the Sucker Punch, just saying, well, I'm threatening Sucker Punch anyway. The targets can't really go for the damage that they want to with their big attacks, and that makes it so that you don't actually have to run the Kowtow Cleave entirely, because you can just pin the slot that you would want to Kowtow Cleave otherwise, and instead of needing that move option. Another thing to actually say about this match is that it's a rematch from the World Championships. These two actually played in day one, which is pretty interesting, and that did go the way of Pepe. In the end, Pepe ended up making top 16, and Darts ended up making top 32. So, kind of a throwback there, and we'll see if Darts can get his revenge in this one.
Mm-hmm. Certainly, it's a new meta game. It's a new way of playing. Nobody's had the chance to really figure everything out completely, right? And I think that gives us a lot of opportunity to play around, the team compositions. Although we know a lot of the strong big bits, we don't actually know exactly yet how all of the pieces interact. Nobody's had a chance to really figure out all of the mega evolutions and what's possible with all of them, right? And so, playing in the World Championships, where you've had an opportunity to really practice and stress test everything that you're playing with in a meta game that you really do understand. This is a really great opportunity to see how players react to the early stages of a format where it's like, well, don't quite know what's going on. This kind of thing looks quite strong. This is, I think, where you see moves like Light of Ruin become really, really powerful, right? Because people haven't quite worked out their cores and their compositions. You've got answers to Mega Floette, but maybe they're not as good as they could be, or maybe there's a few other ways that you can deal with it. And Light of Ruin just putting a hole in a team that already maybe has a couple of holes in it, because it's so early, we don't know any better yet. Really can be really very, very strong.
Yeah, I mean, this Talonflame set too, with the no item, is a kind of a throwback to Kaito Ari, or otherwise known as UB Slow, winning Japan Nationals in 2023 with a Talonflame that had no item and running acrobatics. Leading up to that Nationals, he was actually using this online on the ladder and kind of dominating, holding on to the rank 1 position for a long time with this exact set, and ended up winning Japan Nationals with this same Talonflame. And so it's nice to see this set kind of having a resurgence in a way, where the Talonflame gets this immediate damage that it doesn't have to lose its Gale Wings for attacking. You would see people with Brave. Of course, back in the day, Gale Wings was, unconditional, right?
Much better.
You would get it all the time. But now it's a lot more balanced in the way that you only get it at full HP, and so after the recall, you wouldn't have it anymore. And here with acrobatics, you can more freely use it on consecutive turns.
Okay, so let's get this game 2 started. Slushy versus Stecca, and if you just joined us, we're getting a really great match between these two trainers. Did go Stecca's way in game 1, but Slushy getting an opportunity. In fact, no, that is an overlay from the previous one. Apologies for that, trainers. We are the first match with Pepe versus Darts here. Komodo, Aegislash, and Floette leading us out.
Yeah, I mean, here you'd be in a really comfortable position to just attack with Aegislash from both ends here. Of course, with the Aegislash, you have to assume that Darts is probably faster than the one that Pepe has. And we see the Incineroar switch in here, which will immediately consume this white herb on the Aegislash.
Yeah, it's like which Aegislash versus Aegislash makes the mirror match much nicer actually overall for Darts to play, because he doesn't have to worry about Poltergeist anymore, only Shadow Sneak doing damage now that his item is no more. Aegislash though going for a King's Shield, so this is a typical Pepe play. He really likes playing in this sort of slow, more positional kind of way. Bring in the Incineroar, King's Shield with the King Gambit, and then from there just adjust that little bit to try to get in a more advantageous position without losing anything in the process.
Yeah, exactly. Pepe there just saying, well, this Aegislash is probably faster than mine and threatening a strong Poltergeist. And so I don't want to also take too much damage on the Como as well, but I want to get my Intimidate going, or at least burn through the White Herb instantly. And it's basically saying, well, I can switch an Incineroar and go for King's Shield, and burn through the White Herb immediately, and then threaten a Parting Shot on the following turn. And just kind of get that damage mitigation going. But honestly pays a pretty hefty price in the process, taking a lot of damage on Incineroar. And you have to consider that this Incineroar doesn't have Citrus Berry, it's Trouble Berry, which will help take the Sacred Sword better, but certainly won't survive a double up from these two Pokemon.
So a double Protect coming out, or a Protect King's Shield coming out for Darts here, and saying that they don't want to take a Fake Out, nor do they want to take a risk of a Flare Blitz coming out from this Incineroar. But Pepe deciding to just Parting Shot, and that does go through King's Shield. So not like Spiky Shield, where it does block those status conditions, instead it lets them through at the expense of being able to protect from damage, and of course change Aegislash's form back into that shield stance so that it can take those big attacks a little bit better. And also not hang itself out against a Shadow Sneak coming out from Pepe's Aegislash.
Yeah, I mean, we see the Parting Shot immediately into the Tyranitar here. Now that this Aegislash is one stage of decreased attack, you have to think that this Tyranitar is in a little bit better of a position. Of course, Darts does have the Light of Ruin, which would KO Tyranitar anyway through this Sand Boost, which is crazy to even say. But yeah, I mean, you still have to be scared if you're Pepe here. Like, you've been improving your position slowly, but these two Pokemon just threaten so much damage in all the right places. And I mean, you have to think, well, Darts has the option to Dazzling Gleam and Poltergeist, or Dazzling Gleam and Sacred Sword, Moonblast and Sacred Sword. I mean, there's just so many options for combining attacks from these two to threaten so much damage.
One advantage that Pepe does have is that Mega Tyranitar is a gigantic wall of stats, and so regular Tyranitar, sure. I'm not sure if this Light of Ruin would actually knock out this Mega Tyranitar through, but we're not going to find that out. This Incineroar is going to be hitting the dust here with a Light of Ruin into that slot, and Darts has got to take a hefty chunk of HP in recall for the amount of damage that move dished out.
Yeah, so there, Darts basically saying, well, my Aegislash is already at a decreased stage of attack, and I want rid of this Aegislash instantly because all my Pokemon have ways of dealing with this Tyranitar, and the Aegislash is the thing that troubles me. And so Pepe is also saying, well, I want my Aegislash, and I don't want to lose it too early, so I'll give you my Incineroar that's already damaged instead. And we actually see the Aegislash goes before the Tyranitar, and that makes it so that the Crunch actually hits into the Blade form for a KO.
Which is quite surprising as well, given that Tyranitar gets a speed boost when it goes for its Mega Revolution as well. So it speaks a little bit, I think both the Pepe's probably got a little bit of information about how fast Darts has trained their Aegislash to be out of that turn as well. But with the Aegislash coming back in for Pepe, I think, and the Basculegion now coming in with a KO in hand, especially really nice against an Aegislash, right? Because Last Respect does not make contact, and therefore this Basculegion can just go straight on the offensive with a Last Respect, boosted up to 100 base power into the Aegislash without fear that King's Shield is actually going to drop the attack of the Basculegion. But then also, there's still the threat of that Light of Ruin on the board as well, whether or not that KOs this Mega Tyranitar or not.
Yeah, so Pepe here actually opts for the Shadow Sneak, kind of assuming, well, I'm going to take Last Respects on my Aegislash anyway, And we see the Light of Ruin just pick up the KO on Mega Tyranitar with the Sand Boost. I mean, that is just the power of Mega Floette right there. If you connect that Light of Ruin, you are removing almost anything that isn't resisting it. I mean, that's just insane damage, and Last Respects will come through onto the Aegislash for a clean one-hit knockout. Their Basket Legion was in an amazing spot, and so was Floette, kind of just saying, well, I cover for my Floette, I can't ever really take big damage as long as I'm going for Last Respects into the Aegislash, and that Light of Ruin into the Tyranitar. So pretty much a foolproof play, just saying, well, the only way I can pretty much lose from here is missing that Light of Ruin, which is 90% accurate. And now here you have this Acrobatics and this Last Respects to clean up this Kommo-o and take the game.
And it's like, well, you lost your Fairy type Pokemon, the Mega Floette, in front of the Kommo-o, but actually that's also powering up the Last Respects from Dart's Basket Legion and bringing in the Flying type. And so you're pretty happy to make that trade overall. You prefer your Talonflame to be sitting in front of a Kommo-o than a Mega Tyranitar, that's for sure.
Yeah, I think that defensively speaking, Pepe played this well, but you have to consider that there's no speed control on his end, right? Darts has all the speed control, has the faster Pokemon, and so these attacks are coming out before Pepe can really deal with them, right? And so that's why you see the Shadow Sneak from the Aegislash-2, like, you're not even getting the full attacks that you want to here, and I mean, you have to think maybe lean into the Trick Room mode from the Sinistcha, right? Because that's really the only speed control this team has.
Because you think as well that Shadow Sneak was boosted up by the Spell Tag as well, right? So you're seeing that even after a Light of Ruin, like what you'd love in that position is to be, okay, well, I've taken one Light of Ruin to the face, now my Aegislash can knock out the Floette with Shadow Sneak, and then we can play some Pokemon again, right? Because the Floette's not on the board anymore. Unfortunately, it's just not even close to enough, and Floette's obviously bulky enough to be able to take those attacks. And it's worth saying it's worth bulking out your Floettes even when you're playing these Light of Ruin games, because sometimes you never click the button, right? And so all of those things are going in Dart's favor. So I do agree that the Sinistcha is a great adjustment piece here and bringing in some sort of more positive speed control, negative speed control, depending on how you want to phrase it. Yeah. But is it that easy when if Darts just leads out again with a Ghost type in Aegislash with Poltergeist and Mega Floette with Light of Ruin? Seems still pretty hard to me to be able to get into that Trick Room environment that you want to be in.
Yeah, I mean, there's just so much damage on Darts' end, right? Like, there's just so much coming up from the Poltergeist, the Light of Ruin, the Last Respects after you lose a Pokemon or two, and Pepe just doesn't have a lot of speed control for this, and so you have to think maybe we're angling towards this Sinistcha potentially being in the back and setting Trick Room for a better position here, because otherwise you're just going to get run over like last game, where these Pokemon are going to be able to just attack at free will, right? And so we see the Incineroar and Aegislash here to immediately get this Intimidate down, burn to the Light Herb on turn 1 without having to switch in the Incineroar and take damage, which I like a lot more. Just saying, like, well, I can just get rid of the Light Herb immediately, I can pivot out with Parting Shot or a Hard Switch, and we see the King Shield coming out from the Aegislash here. We have to assume that this is a Parting Shot or an attack into this Aegislash to catch it in Blade form, if this Aegislash is faster, and it does move first.
Oh, but a Sacred Sword could definitely threaten a lot of damage here. With the Chocolate Berry, it's not going to be able to pick up the KO, but like, that's a lot of damage to take on your Incineroar on turn 1. You definitely gonna want to get something out of that turn, and I'm not sure that the Parting Shot is getting enough out of that turn, unless there is a Floette in the back, and that's the adjustment that Pepe's going to be making. Instead, not bringing the Kommo-o and trying to put their own kind of Mega Floette pressure down on the board.
Yeah, I like this setup a lot more from Pepe, despite getting predicted turn 1 and taking a lot of damage on the Incineroar. This Floette now comes into a nice position where you can even switch in the Incineroar for the Aegislash this turn, or threaten this Spell Tag Shadow Sneak into the opposing Aegis Slash, which would probably just KO outright, I would assume. And so this position looks a lot better for Pepe now, where the Mega Floette is in a much more commanding position, basically saying, well, I can Dazzling Gleam this board for free, right? And nothing really wants to switch in on it, because Talon Flame is really your best resist, right? So Dazzling Gleam here is very threatening. Incineroar can switch in freely. The Aegis Slash here on Pepe's end is still in shield form, so it's not going to take a lot, like as much damage as it would otherwise. And so it's really on Darts to figure out how I'm going to play around this Floette.
Yeah, it seems like the question about the Shadow Sneak is whether or not the Garchomp just goes straight for the Stomping Tantrum again into that slot. So yeah, okay. The Shadow Sneak knocks out the Aegis Slash, and I think that's definitely a trade that you want to make if you're Pepe. But here's the Stomping Tantrum back, and whether or not trading your own Aegis Slash, knowing that there's probably another Floette on the other side of the field, ready to come back in after you take these 2 KOs, maybe a difficult momentum swing for Pepe to be able to stomach here. And it could give Darts the ability to bring in, say, Basculegion Floette, which, you know, the combination of Last Respect and Light of Ruin, Moonblast, Dazzling Gleam, and all of those fun things might be just that little bit too much for Pepe to come back from.
Yeah, I think there maybe Darts missed an opportunity to use King's Shield with the Aegis Slash just to get back into shield form and preserve it a bit more, considering that Stomping Tantrum would always KO that partner slot. And I mean, if you're coming into a Poltergeist there, you'd rather just wait until you can get back in shield form, or wait until there's an opportunity to safely switch out the Aegis Slash. But now with it being gone, you do immediately get into both Floette and Basculegion, which is arguably even better than preserving your Aegis Slash, right? I mean, you're threatening this Last Respects with the Focus Sash might even be faster than this Calm Mind Floette, because some of them actually go quite slow. And so you can threaten this 150 base power Last Respects with this Dazzling Gleam. And I mean, that's a lot of damage to still respect, considering you just took 2 KOs.
So the Fake Out does indeed go into the Floette, and Darts preserving their Floette very wisely there. Even after the Intimidate, the Last Respect is doing so much damage there, and especially since this Basculegion is... Now, let's just double check this. Yeah, Basculegion's carrying the Focus Sash rather than the Choice Scarf there, so it's not guaranteed that it's going to be able to outspeed the Floette on Pepe's side, but we have seen the interaction between the 2 Floettes, I believe. No, we haven't seen the interaction, so yeah, we're gonna have to see like which Floette is gonna be moving first, because actually Floette can be faster than this Basculegion and isn't currently an Aquajet mode.
Yeah, you have to assume that the Floette on Darts' end is faster with this tailored mode.
Probably.
But I would assume that Dazzling Gleam and a Last Respect into this Incineroar slot will pin all of Pepe's options here. There's really not much you can switch into. Anything would just get doubled up into for a KO. And we see Moonblast just to make sure that if Dazzling wasn't enough, that will take it out. And Last Respects will just KO this Incineroar. Here, I don't know if there's really anything that Pepe can bring in to win this game. Maybe you have a Sinistra and you're able to fish for like a critical hit Moonblast into the Floette. But even then, I think Darts just has too strong of a position to really weather the storm here.
I think you're right. I think the only way this goes well for Pepe is to Rage Powder away a Last Respect and a Moonblast from the Floette and Basculegion, and hope that the only 2 KOs and the Intimidate is enough for this Sinistra to hang on from the Last Respects, take the second attack. Then maybe you get an opportunity to Dazzling Gleam and then Moonblast afterwards, but again, that does rely on your Floette being faster than Darts' Floette.
Yes, I think that Darts is pretty confident with it being faster here, and I think the only way that this can go wrong is if you target into the Floette and it gets a double protect, but as we see, that doesn't even happen here. If the Last Respects did go into the Floette and it got the protect, then Tricker would go up, and of course, Darts correctly targets the Sinistra, does not give a chance for Pepe to come back into the game, and that's the match right there.
That's definitely all she wrote. The Basculegion definitely gets to even just Aquajet here, but Pepe knows the score. He's been in these sort of positions before. And another 2-0 victory here. Darts getting the win and taking the win overall for Team Z here in this friendly match.
Yeah, really strong play by Chris, just from Darts, just identifying all of the correct plays to make. I think had a really strong matchup with that Sacred Sword Aegislash. Very key detail there. Usually you would see the Iron Head on the physical sets. This one chose to forego it, and the Sacred Sword paid off in dividends. You saw it threaten the Tyranitar in game 1. Hit the Incineroar with that double target in game 2, even through the Choppleberry, did a significant amount of damage. Just put Darts in such a strong position for later in the game, getting that damage down on Incineroar early, also catching the King Shield on Aegislash there on turn 1. And from then on, Floette was just in a perfect position to target next to that Basket Legion with Dazzling Gleam and Moonblast next to that boosted Last Respect. And that would put the score to 8-4 in Team Z's favor, which secures the match for Team Z. And we have one other match that was just played in the meantime with Clippers and Lil Bo Peep going 2-1 in Clippers' favor, which would bring the score now to 9-4. And then now we just have Torviv and Marco Fierro to close it out.
I mean, this is a pretty nice match to close things out, right? This is definitely something that I've been looking forward to all afternoon, all evening, to be getting to, because these two players are phenomenal. All of our players are phenomenal, of course, but this one's definitely a match I've been looking forward to.
Yeah. I mean, you have some of the most storied players in the game, right? I mean, this is a rematch of the LEIC finals last year. Two historically strong trainers, both from the 2018 senior division class, that have aged up and dominated Masters. I mean, you see Marco's results here. 2-time LEIC champion and winner of the Oceania Internationals back when those happened. And that doesn't even cover his 2-time World Championships top 16 results, his regional titles. I mean, the list goes on, right?
You'd kind of need the team list graphic to
yes.
I mean, his achievements in.
Yeah, a laundry list rather. I mean, it's so extensive. Yeah, I mean, one of the strongest players in the world, undoubtedly, and bringing a kind of throwback with the Mega Kangaskhan. This is a Mega that we haven't actually seen much of recently, but of course dominated during the Generation 6 era from 2014 through 2016, back when that parental bond was at its full power. And very threatening Pokemon. We actually usually see Drain Punch instead of Low Kick on the Kangaskhan here, and the Aerodactyl here, standard moveset, the Milotic here, using Life Dew instead of something like Recover will help with the overall team's bulk, but there's no actual setup on the Floette. It's actually Light of Ruin. And so the Life Dew here is mostly just for overall healing instead of going for a win condition. The Aegislash here is actually opting for the Iron Head in that slot with the Poltergeist and Shadow Sneak physical sets, and the Garchomp to round out the team with Soft Sand and 2 ground moves instead of something like Rock Slide that would otherwise threaten Charizard. You do have the Aerodactyl to help cover for that, so Marco is saying, well, I already have Aerodactyl, and I have, Kangaskhan and Milotic that can help kind of weather the storm against Charizard. I can afford to drop it for using 2 ground moves and Dragon Claw instead.
One of the things that Kangaskhan hasn't lost overall in all these years is the significant amount of bulk and the ability to stay on the field and put some pressure on. But I think in a format that's restricted power as this is, actually non-Mega Kangaskhan becomes a pretty reasonable fake-out Pokemon. Inner Focus does a lot of work for it to be able to just keep the ability to fake out in front of other fake outers and get itself into a good position, even if you are supporting the Mega Floette. And of course, it retains its immunity to Intimidate, and so even if Kangaskhan hasn't gone for its Mega, hasn't got that boost of attack and its parental bond, Double Edge is still doing a good chunk of damage regardless. So I like to see this sort of core. I do think that Kangaskhan is a little bit underexplored in our current format, but hey, like, we're going to get an opportunity to see a little bit here. Let's move over onto Torviv's side and see what he's going to be running, because while you see Marco his first all the way through, Torviv Victor is the second place, the distinct runner-up, which a real testament to his consistency. But we're just waiting for Torviv to win his first event.
Yeah, I mean, you have to call out Torviv's resume as well as one of the top players in the world. Of course, still lacking that major win, but has gotten so close a number of times here. I mean, you just see second place. I mean, he's been winning tournaments online for a number of years, and when it comes to these in-person tournaments, he's placed top 8 at the World Championships twice now, both in Scarlet Violet. I mean, he's had the results there. It's just he just can't get that win. I mean, it escapes him time and time again. He gets so close, and so yeah. I mean, he's just on the precipice of that win time and time again, but still revered as a world-class player in all respects. Using this Floette and Tyranitar team, earlier we actually saw the dual Mega option. This time the Tyranitar is actually Focus Sash, and it's interesting to see Floette with a calm mindset on a Tyranitar team, because you would think it's a bit counterintuitive, right? If you're setting up and wanting to preserve your HP, you don't really want sand chipping down your Floette, right? But you do have this Sinistra to help provide healing with the Hospitality and the Life Dew. You have this Incineroar with Trouble Berry, very similar to how we've seen before, to help counteract Sneasler with White Herb. And you have this Corviknight here, which even further improves your matchup into Sneasler and Pokemon like Garchomp, which you can wall out with the Bulk Up and roost off all the damage you've taken. It actually is Iron Head here instead of something like Body Press, because you already match up very well into things like Tyranitar with the Bulk Up, and so you'd much rather hit Floette, which is a huge problem if it gets in the right positions with that Iron Head. And Sneasler here rounding out the team with a standard Unburdened White Herb set, using Dire Claw instead of something like Gunk Shot or the Poison Jab we saw earlier as well. Just a very, very strong team, and I'm interested to see how these two players play it out.
I do like how the Tyranitar is sitting in a little bit more of an offensive slot with the slower nature of some of the other components on Victor's team here. Let's get things started. Last match of the day, Corviknight and Floette leading things off for Victor for Torviv, and Garchomp and A/Slash here for Marco.
Yeah, I mean, instantly out the gate, I would assume that like this Corviknight is just in a fantastic spot, right? I mean, you're just going to get these bulk ups going and get yourself into an unbreakable position. I would assume that Marco is looking to kind of remove everything outside of the Corviknight and then deal with it in the end game, because you don't really have a lot of immediate damage for it. Yes, you have this Poltergeist, but it's going to be doing significantly less damage each time you use bulk up. And this Roost here makes the Corviknight able to heal up half of its HP whenever it so chooses. So I think Victor here is going to try and leverage this offensive slot next to the Corviknight to allow this Corviknight to become the win condition for later in the game.
Okay, so we're seeing Floette on Torviv's side going a little bit on the offensive on this first turn and trying to put the pressure down while the Corviknight is getting set up. Actually, no, he's going for the protect. Normally when you see a Pokemon go for its Mega, it's wanting to do something that turn rather than protect itself, but no reason not to Mega in this situation at all. Here's the Poltergeist going down into the Corviknight, and Marco just trying to get that initial little bit of damage, or quite a lot of damage down onto this Corviknight. Now, one of the ways that you can actually play down against Corviknights is Milotic can use its Mirror Herb against, Mirror Armor against the Corviknight, where if you go for an Icy Wind, it reflects the Icy Wind speed drop back onto the Milotic, and that does count for the competitive ability. So the Milotic can get itself boosted up while it's trying to get some damage down into this Corviknight.
Yeah, so here, Torviv is basically saying, well, I want this Milotic gone, but it misses the knockout with this Moonblast plus Brave for double up there. Torviv, knowing that Moonblast will not do more than half to the Milotic, basically saying, well, I can take the KO here if I don't activate Citrus Berry, and the Iron Head actually misses the KO on the floor just barely.
1 HP and a dream, and now the Tyranitar and the Sand Chip that you were talking about in Team Preview is looking pretty detrimental for this Floette.
Yeah, I mean, there you have to assume that, like, well, Torviv is in an amazing spot. You just attack, remove the Milotic, and then you can roost off with the Corviknight. But now this position starts to look very scary with the Shadow Sneak here and this faster Milotic threatening Scald, right? Like, you're just really scared for this Corviknight having to stick around for later in the game, but you just don't have a lot of HP to work with here, and you really need a roost to put it in a more healthy position to wall out the Scourge Health later in the game and whatever else Marco decides to bring.
It's a really tough position for Torviv to be in, but the Sinister does come to the rescue here and gives a lot of help. That's both not going to be KO'd by a Shadow Sneak whatsoever, but also going to allow this Corviknight to take another Scald. The question is, 2 Scalds, no burn. That's really, really big for Torviv here. That's exactly what he wants to see as the Roost gets this Corviknight recovering itself back up. And the Sinister takes an Iron Head pretty well overall. And so now we're seeing the position flipping back, I think, overall into Torviv having a lot more options at his disposal.
Yeah, so there we actually see a really interesting set of plays. We see Torviv switching the Sinister to cover for a Shadow Sneak and a Scald that would otherwise pick up the Corviknight from that range, making sure that you get the Roost off, keep the Corviknight healthy, and unable to be knocked out on that turn. And another thing is, Marco actually went for the Iron Head instead of the Poltergeist, which would have done so much damage to the Sinister to pretty much knock it out instantly. But basically saying, I think Tyranitar is switching in here instead. I'd rather Iron Head to cover for it, but doesn't get it. And so now Torviv's in a spot where this Corviknight starts to become more and more of a problem as it's continued to stay around.
And the Brave Bird probably in a position where it can knock out this Milotic, and so Marco protecting it there. But Torviv taking advantage of that and just going for the bulk up there, getting this set up that little bit more, actually relying on the match of Gotcha to be able to deal with this Milotic rather than the Brave Bird. And that comes with the ability for the Sinister to get some health back and maybe pick up a burn at the same time onto this Aegislash, but not before Poltergeist is able to attack the Citrus Berry and knock it out. So you kind of think it's a little bit of a weird spot, right? If Marco had gone for the Poltergeist into the Sinister on the switch in, probably wouldn't have been KO'd, activated its Citrus Berry, and then it's only Shadow Sneak that can do any damage to the Sinister, not the Poltergeist.
Yeah, I think it's actually really interesting to show that the Aegislash is now stayed in Blade form for now 3 consecutive turns, just attacking, right? And so
Aegislash, that's Aegislash in a nutshell.
And so, yeah, Aegislash has been able to deal a lot of damage here. Pretty much knocking out the Floette, leaving it at 1 HP, now knocking out the Sinistra, and then forcing out the Incineroar as the Pokemon waiting in the back. And now this Milotic does have this competitive boost, and Torviv would like to just remove it instantly with this Brave Bird, but yeah, I mean, you're just dedicating a lot of resources to remove this one Pokemon and really hoping that Corviknight is able to carry the weight through the rest of this game.
And to be fair, with the Pokemon that we've seen so far, the Corviknight actually looks pretty good overall, right? It's doing a lot of work here. And Torviv getting the call right here to just fake out a Brave Bird while this Garchomp switches in for Marco there, preserving this Aegislash. That's one way to change it back into Shield Corn, I suppose. Switch it out and get it back in a little bit later on.
Yeah, I think that when you look at Marco's team, the one Pokemon that you would really like to have is a leftovers bulk of Corviknight to deal with all these Pokemon. I mean, it's just such a strong Pokemon to Iron Head this Floette, to Braver down the Milotic and Garchomp, and to just bulk up and roost off this Aegislash. And so it really becomes how will Marco actually remove this Corviknight? I mean, the damage is just not there at this point. I mean, you have to assume that he's now leaning into the Light of Ruin as a way to help break the Corviknight in combination with the other attacks. But this Garchomp doesn't even have Rock Slide to help
Yeah, it's
flinch it.
just Dragon Claw. Yeah, so no Rock Slide. Where there's no Rock Slide, maybe there's no way through this Corviknight. Now the Floette gets to switch in, and this is a really great switch in for Torviv here, because not only is the Floette really not providing too much value with the threat of Shadow Sneak from the Aegislash and the Garchomp that probably outspeeds it at this point, but also it gets you the ability to cycle in this Intimidate from the Incineroar again and stop it from being KO'd by this Garchomp in one hit.
Yeah, I mean, here I think it's just kind of like Corviknight's game at this point, right? You kind of have to navigate this endgame properly, make sure that you're not taking too much Brave Bird recoil to put yourself in range of something like Light of Ruin and Poltergeist. So you have to make sure that you're timing this Brave Bird properly and make sure that you have enough turns of leftovers and roost to stay healthy enough so that this Corviknight can win this presumed 1v3 here. Because it will end up being alone eventually. I would assume that this Incineroar drops to a couple of Stomping Tantrums, and so it now becomes how will Corviknight be able to deal with the onslaught of these three attackers.
But I think another bulk up is one of those ways that you can really deal with those situations. And yeah, it's getting very close to a 1v3. The nice thing here about this bulk up actually is it looks like it might get that Aegislash back in range of an Iron Head knockout on the switch in. And so I think Torviv is positioning the Corviknight in such a way that it doesn't necessarily have to go for the Brave Bird and take any recoil damage in order to pick up the knockout on the Pokemon that Marco has left available. And I think that's a really clever way to play this Corviknight.
Yeah,
you're not necessarily
really like
in a rush, right?
Yes, exactly. I really like the third trap there into the Garchomp, basically saying, well, I want damage on it so that my Rough Skin and Brave Bird recoil is less. Ideally, you would prefer the Iron Head, of course, but basically saying I want to take as little damage as possible from recoil if I have to go for that, because Iron Head will surely get this Floette, and you should just be able to stall this Aegislash without the critical hit coming through. And so here, Victor, Torviv is just trying to just keep the Corviknight set up. I believe it's already at 3 stages of increased attack and defense, and so you're really angling towards removing this Floette and then stalling out the Garchomp while you deal with the Aegislash.
Yeah, and there's no reason here for Torviv to attack into the Garchomp slot at all until the last possible moment. Not least because of the Rough Skin and the Brave Bird recoil, but also because it has the least opportunity for the ability to do damage. I mean, look at that. That's what 9 hit points from the Dragon Claw, and here's the Iron Head into the Aegislash. So one more will do the business onto this Aegislash, and I'm not 100% sure if we've seen the interaction of speed between the Corviknight and the Aegislash, but I'd be surprised if we didn't see the Aegislash go down to either another Iron Head or a Brave Bird. Slightly more powerful, more guaranteed that you're going to actually pick up the KO here.
Yeah, the thing is, Marco doesn't actually have any sort of speed control to change the order of those attacks, right? The interactions are always going to be constant here, and so this Corviknight is just able to kind of target what it wants with the position that it's in. And so here, Torviv actually opts to go for another bulk up, now going to 4 stages of increased attack and defense. Not sure if that's even necessary at this point, considering how much damage you're exerting, but maybe just saying, well, I want to make sure Iron Head gets the knockout on the Garchomp instead of the Brave Bird, which I think is completely valid, right? You don't really want a Brave Bird into Rough Skin as well. It's a lot of damage to take, and Iron Head would definitely pick up at 4 stages of increased attack. And so this Corviknight's now looking in a really threatening spot.
I don't think there's any reason for Torviv to actually go and attack. If Torviv thinks that there's going to be Marco going on the offensive, then Marco has just, or so Torviv just has the opportunity to just bulk up instead of taking any rough skin chip or anything else. And it also means that inevitably, when you attack into a few protects on the way through, that actually you can take those extra Dragon Claws, you can take those extra Poltergeists because you've got those boosts up. The downside is that every time that you attack into the wrong slot, you open up an opportunity for a critical hit.
Yeah, I mean, here, Torviv is just trying to make sure that the Corviknight is healthy enough. Marco there actually Marco Fiero getting a great read there, assuming Iron Head into the Floette, catches it and gets some chip damage with the Poltergeist. And here you have to think that Marco Fiero might be angling for switching in the Garchomp to take the rough skin damage on that Corviknight. And maybe another Poltergeist might put this in range of Light of
there it is.
And Torviv reads it, targeting the Aegis Slash instead. A great turn for Torviv there, calling out the Garchomp switch in for the rough skin damage. And now this Corviknight looks unbreakable. I mean, this Garchomp can't contribute much with this Dragon Claw, dealing less than 10 damage per turn. I mean, the leftovers is healing more than this Dragon Claw is dealing. And this Floette probably doesn't even get there with a Light of Ruin critical hit. I mean, you have to imagine that it's doing maybe just around half. I mean, a double crit would do it, but that is probably all that Marco Fiero can hope for.
You gotta ask for it. You gotta ask.
Yeah.
You don't ask, you don't get it. You don't ask, you don't get it.
I mean, this Corviknight is just in such a good spot here, and you could probably even just stall the Floette using Roost repetitively and making it take that recoil damage. But here, Ironhead simply going into the Floette, knowing that the Garchomp is not a threat whatsoever to this boosted Corviknight. And now it just comes down to if this combination of attacks does get these critical hits into this Corviknight, because otherwise, I mean, you're not breaking it, right? Like, this Corviknight is in such a good spot, has been able to keep it on the field since turn 1 and just set up in front of Marco Fiero's entire team. You have to think that this game would probably change with a Scald Burn, making it so that this Corviknight would not have nearly enough turns to just freely set up and fire off all these attacks. As you see this Light of Ruin do roughly 50% of damage after that Dragon Claw chip. It does do a lot, of course, but this Ironhead will freely pick up this Floette, and now a Dragon Claw critical hit is surely not enough at this point to deal with this Corviknight.
Definitely not. And you know, there's no point doing it this turn, right? You want to roost up. You want to make sure that you're in a good spot to be able to get into. Not have to worry about those critical hits or anything else going on. And Marco knows what's going on here. Knows that was the last opportunity possible for him to be able to clean up this game. And I want to say, like, this, it's such a tough set of turns to be playing when you're in Marco's spot against a Corviknight that has boosted up that many times. You know where the end game is going, right? And all you're hoping for is that you can make enough right calls enough times in a row to be able to kind of get all of the way. And the question becomes less like, what's my assured route to victory, and where's my switch ups along the way? How do I make sure I get like 2 or 3 more attacks at the most in that situation to give myself the best possible opportunity?
Yeah, I think that game right there is a perfect example of why these teams actually have Corviknight. You see a lot of these teams that have more hostile answers to Floette and this Calm Mind setup that Torviv has. A lot of those teams don't have a lot of tools to deal with the Corviknight. And so in a sense, you are setting up 2 Pokemon in one, or at least saying, well, if you're going to bring all of your checks for my Floette, well, have fun trying to break this Corviknight that gets boosted in the meantime, right? And so Torviv there just saying, well, you don't have a lot of damage for it. The best you have is Scald Burns. I'm just going to leave the Corviknight straight up and just start setting up these bulk ups and get going from there.
So the question is, as we get into our game 2 here between Marco and Victor, whether or not Marco is going to bring it enough tools this time to be able to deal with that Corviknight that absolutely flew away with that match. It's Corviknight and Sneasler leading us off for Victor, and Milotic Aegislash leading us off for Marco. So Marco definitely wanting to put some pressure onto that Corviknight early, maybe try and get that Skull Burn this time round.
Yeah, I really like the lead of the Milotic this time around for Marco Fierro. You have to think that just going for Scald straight up multiple turns is the way around this Corviknight. We saw it go for Scald twice last game, did not get it burned with either of those, and the Corviknight was able to run away with the game. And so now you have the Milotic on the field on turn 1 instead of waiting to bring it in on a switch in, and now it'll take a close combat for its troubles. Will it eat the Citrus Berry though to come over Hoff? Yes. Milotic here will still be able to Scald freely. Of course, Bravebird wouldn't even KO her in this range, and you're starting to get a Scald before a bulk up even goes in, and the burn, which Victor was hoping to not take on the Corviknight here. The bulk up set here on the Corviknight will be carrying the load of this game too as well, presumably, because I mean you have to angle towards this, but Marco Fierro here getting a lot of damage on the Corviknight on turn 1 to bring it low and basically make it a non-factor for the rest of this game, I would assume, with that burn and that much damage. I mean, you're going to spend at least the next 2 turns wanting to play defensively with Roost and maybe another bulk up there just to cancel out the burn debuffs.
And the main thing here as well is that Corviknight's maximum output is 2 times its overall output. If it gets 6 bulk ups up, it'll be doing double its normal damage, but to do that, you need to spend 6 turns bulking up, and that gives Marco a lot more time to play around the rest of the threats that Torviv has and isolate that Corviknight in the way that he did before. But this time, maybe that little bit more successfully because the damage output just isn't there.
Yeah, another thing I want to point out here between these 2 games so far is that you've seen every time, almost every time that Torviv has the opportunity to protect the Corviknight ally, that is exactly what is happening. You really just want to buy enough turns for this Corviknight to set up, because here from Marco Fierro's end, you are just going to ignore this Corviknight and attack everything else. And I mean, between the Sneasler and the Floette, at least you have Protect on those and this Focus Sash Tyranitar, but you don't have Protect on the Sinistcha and the Incineroar. So you really need to make sure that you're targeting down this ally slot of the Corviknight as much as possible and leaving it for the end game.
One of the nice things that Torviv's doing to react to that, though, is to at least go on the offensive and try to put some pressure on, and saying, well, okay, now my Sneasler's gone down to your Garchomp, but in return I've done 60% overall to your Milotic and wasted the Citrus Berry. I've done a big chunk of damage to the Garchomp, and so if my Corviknight isn't going to be endgaming in the same way that it did last game, at least you've got less resources to play with, unless critical hit comes out from that Poltergeist. We were waiting for it in game 1. Marco waited until game 2 to give it to us, and now that Corviknight both burnt and critical hits, Torviv probably hoping is like, hey, hopefully this is isolated to just this game. And maybe if we go to game 3, things will work out a little bit better for me.
Yeah, exactly there. I mean, you see this matchup and you know that Torviv is going to be leaning into this Corviknight as much as possible, and Marco Fierro has made the perfect adjustment going for that Scald and Poltergeist immediately on turn 1 to deal a lot of damage, get the burn, and then just simply ignore it, right? I mean, the Poltergeist didn't really need to get a critical hit for Marco Fierro to still continue having a strong position. Here, you would just double target the partner of the Corviknight repetitively, and I mean, here there's really not much that Torviv can do to bring back this game.
I think, given that the Incineroar came in and didn't boost up the Milotic has a lot of damage in the back. Actually, in Trick Room, the offensive potential of Incineroar and the Sinistcha kind of not bad, given that the Garchomp has taken a big amount of chip as well. I think it's going to struggle if the Floette's in the back for Marco to be able to break through that without a super effective hit like I had from the Corviknight. but against everything else, actually, this is definitely still playable.
I'm a bit surprised to see this H-Slash actually stay in. I would think that it would want to switch out for the Milotic, just sacrifice this Milotic and the Garchomp, but this Flare Blitz coming through, getting the burn as well, making sure that this Poltergeist is going to do significantly less damage than it would otherwise, combining the Intimidate with the burn now. Sinistra taking the less than half, which is game-changing for Torviv here. Matcha Gotcha comes through, will barely miss the KO on the Aegislash. The burn will, of course, pick that up, but the Garchomp here really hoping for a burn on it, and it does not get it, which means that this Dominator will be hitting for the double base power from the fake out previously and knocking out the Incineroar in one shot, and the Sinistra is left alone and helpless to deal with the presumed Floette waiting in the back for Marco Fierro.
Yes, like Torviv's looking at us like, Kangaskhan, please? Kangaskhan?
Yes.
Oh, no, it's Floette. Yeah, I mean, there's no reason for the Kangaskhan overall to come to this matchup. It's pretty favourable for the Floette over the Kangaskhan. So no surprises there. No surprises to see the forfeit coming out from Torviv. Marco playing to all of the outs that they have available against the Corviknight, both getting a critical hit against the bulk ups, but also that Scald Burn to just restrict the amount of damage. And I think that's going to be a big part of how this match plays out. But I do want to point out the amount of damage that Poltergeist did even after one bulk up on the Corviknight from the Aegislash, and the lack of ability, certainly in the early game, for Torviv to be able to deal with that Aegislash offensively. Like, it was sitting there in Blade form for a couple of turns. It sat in Blade form for a few turns in game one as well. There's not as many tools with the Pokemon that Torviv is bringing to the match to actually suppress that Aegislash. And maybe Marco's finding this, like, maybe that's one of the routes that they can use to kind of control this Corviknight just that little bit, or maybe enough to create an end game out of it.
Yeah, exactly. I think that you nailed the point very, very clearly, is that Torviv's team relies on its damage scaling over time very, very heavily. And because Marco Fierro can just get a lot of damage down anyway, immediately, even if it's not threatening it to a KO, you can just get that big damage with Poltergeist off. The Aegislash is sitting there repetitively attacking with the Poltergeist and the Iron Heads. You have the Scald from the Milotic that's also very bulky, kind of unbreakable. And if you get a burn here and there, like, you've just gotten so, like, you're just mitigating so much progress from Torviv's end. And I mean, Torviv has to lean into this Corviknight, right? It's like really the best tool available, and supporting that the best you can is going to be the win condition. And really everything else on Torviv's end has kind of just been a victim to other attacks, right? Like we've seen the Sneasler just get hit by the Storm Tantrum, right? The Incineroar's been hit by the Storm Tantrum, but the Sinistra's kind of just been ignored, and like even a burned -1 attack Poltergeist is still almost doing half to the Sinistra. Like the damage from Torviv's end is just really low, and you have to see, like, okay, can Torviv actually threaten enough damage alongside the Corviknight while it's setting up, or get it set up enough to be able to just start attacking and at least trade damage, right? Taking 1 to 2 KOs and getting in a position for Corviknight to win the endgame might actually be what Torviv has to go for here, because we just saw Marco Fierro leave all 4 Pokemon on the field by the end of that game, in that game 2. And so Torviv has to start finding a way to take knockouts, and leading Floette is certainly a way to do that.
Okay, but now we've got the Kangaskhan on the field here, and that could be foreshadowing that there is no Floette. More likely, I think that the Kangaskhan could be just non-mega variant for this matchup, and instead the Aerodactyl and the Kangaskhan could be trying to a slightly different method of putting some damage down onto Torviv's side of the field.
Yeah, I think that the Kangaskhan here is actually very much predicting this sort of lead. You have the Fake Out and the Double Edge threat here into the Corviknight and the Floette respectively. I think this is just Marco Fierro perfectly identifying that this lead would actually come out from Torviv's end. We see the Mega Evolution on the Floette. Here, going
Okay.
before the Kangaskhan, probably suggesting that this Kangaskhan is a more bulky variant. And here, you have to think that Torviv just wants to get as much damage down as possible with this Floette. Here, taking the Fake Out, and in this Corviknight will probably just sit there going for bulk up. This Aerodactyl will come first with the Rock Slide, which threatens the possible flinch chance, and the Corviknight does not flinch, gets a bulk up off, which is very important for it going into this middle game. At least having one boost helps take these Rock Slides so much better. And you have to think that Marco Fiera here is wanting to remove this Floette and then bring in the Milotic as soon as possible to potentially get a Skull Burn before this Corviknight becomes too strong with these bulk up boosts.
But I think this kind of goes forward from what you were saying earlier about Torviv's team having less immediate damage there. There's also the opportunity for lots of Rock Slides to come down into it and just stop this Corviknight moving and do a little bit of damage on the way through as well. But instead, the Milotic comes in here. It's gonna put some skull pressure onto this Corviknight. Hopefully, threaten the burn if you're Marco. And now the Incineroar looks like a good switch in here for Torviv to just put the Intimidate down onto the Kangaskhan. It cannot be intimidated when it hasn't megaed yet because it's either got Inner Focus or Scrappy, but now that it has Mega Evolved, it can be suppressed.
Yeah, I really like the idea of just hiding the Incineroar in the back there. Just saying, well, I can intimidate the Kangaskhan later when it Mega Evolves, but this Milotic here will present issues for the Incineroar, as if it already doesn't present enough problems for Torviv already between this Corviknight and the Floette not throwing enough damage. We do see the Dazzling Gleam come out from the Floette here, which will deal nice damage to this Kangaskhan. And the Kangaskhan will opt for the Double Edge to revenge KO this Floette. And here you have to hope that Torviv targeted down the Kangaskhan, right? Just to remove it instantly instead of targeting down that Milotic. And it does not. It targets down the Milotic instead into the Protect, which does buy more time for this Leftovers to heal the Corviknight back to full. But there you would have really appreciated at least going for a bulk up there.
So I think the question is whether Incineroar or Sneasler is in the back here. It will actually end up being the Sinistcha. I think that's probably the best of the available Pokemon that Torviv could have switched in, right? Because now that Kangaskhan doesn't have any abilities that help it hit Ghost-type Pokemon, a Rage Powder just completely shuts down the Kangaskhan. This is one of the reasons that I said earlier that Kangaskhan was a little bit difficult to bring to this match, because it's quite difficult to be able to utilize to its full extent when you've got a Sinistcha and Intimidates and Sneaslers and low kick Kangaskhan's that can really put a lot of pressure on. Circuit Punch fails into the Trick Room as well. So now this Corviknight not only having 2 bulk ups to its name, but also having probably a speed advantage into everything that Marco has brought.
Yeah, I mean, the Sinistcha here coming in to set Trick Room, but this Aegislash is now on the field with good timing. Unfortunately, this Aegislash has already taken some damage, and so it will be easier for Torviv to remove. But here, I mean, as Torviv's end, you really want to preserve the Sinistcha and knock out this Aegislash so that you have this Brave Bird and Matcha Gotcha combination. But it's a bit more difficult to set up, right? It's easier said than done. You would imagine that Torviv wants to remove the Sinistcha from the field and replace it with something like the Incineroar here to remove this Aegislash and free up the Sinistcha for the Corviknight and Sinistcha to win the endgame.
Yeah, it's like now the Poltergeist goes down into this Incineroar and getting hit in the face with a Chopper Berry. I don't know how much that hurts. Clearly not a lot based on that health bar overall. But the Intimidate doing a lot of work here. And the Corviknight in a great speed spot versus this Aegislash. Now, if the Aegislash ever goes on the offensive, as it has, now it's susceptible to attacks from this Corviknight in Blade form, which it really cannot take very, very well at all.
Yeah, I mean, Marco Fiera, of course, covering for this switch with the low kick But as you can see, that is just the perfect turn for Torviv to have happen. You are able to switch in the Incineroar, intimidate the Kangaskhan, preserve your Sinistcha, force the Aegislash into Blade form, taking minimal damage from the Poltergeist, and then Brave Bird into the Blade form Aegislash for a KO. And now you have the Incineroar on the field before the Milotic comes in, so you're not even activating the competitive boost. I mean, this is the ideal scenario for Torviv considering what his position was the previous turn. And here you just have to assume that Incineroar and Corviknight here are going to double target whatever they so choose, just going for damage straight up. You don't want to use Parting Shot and just cycle the Incineroar. I don't think there's any need. The Corviknight and Incineroar are in a good enough position to just simply attack here and find a position for the Corviknight and Sinistcha endgame.
Yeah, so Kangaskhan needs to be preserved in this spot if you're Marco, so bringing in the Aerodactyl, which has kind of limited utility now overall since we're in Trick Room, will take a Brave Bird pretty well. It will be a good little chunk of recoil damage down onto the Corviknight, but Corviknight's got enough turns to recover with its leftovers and the assistance of Incineroar sitting next to it as well. We've got a couple more Trick Room turns too, and so the combination of Aerodactyl should easily be able to be knocked out if Torviv decides that he wants to target into that slot, and otherwise the Milotic is definitely under threat of a lot of scrutiny from the big attacks. And there's a few ways you can play this, right? There's the Sinistcha in the end game once the Aerodactyl is knocked out is looking really quite strong overall into what Marco has left.
Yeah, I mean, that last turn Fake Out and Brave Bird super safe. The Kangaskhan does not have Protect, and you want to prevent this Milotic from moving. Now we see the Throat Chop actually gets a critical hit on the Milotic, dealing a lot more damage than it would otherwise, and already activating the Citrus Berry, and the Iron Head will clean up the Aerodactyl nicely. Scald comes through and gets the burn on the Corviknight, which might actually help this Kangaskhan and Milotic get more attacks off, but you have to assume that this Corviknight will just end up stalling out these two.
I think where the burn hit in game 2 was really impactful before a lot of the big damage got sent down onto Marco's side of the field, but Marco getting the skull burn this late in the game doesn't necessarily help him as much.
Exactly.
It kind of sets up this game where the Corviknight and the Incineroar just target down into this Kangaskhan, try to knock it out, and then you're left with a Sinistcha versus a Milotic, and Icy Wind ain't cutting it.
Yeah, it almost feels too little too late from this point. The damage that's already been done, you've already KO'd 2 Pokemon, and this Corviknight already has at least some boosts from the bulk up already, and so you just have to keep it healthy with this leftovers and the Roost. I mean, you see Marco Fiero prioritizing it as much as possible, and this Milotic is also still sitting kind of healthy, but this Kangaskhan is now very low, and any attack from this point will pick it off. And that's not even to mention the Sinistcha waiting in the back to deal with this Milotic, right? It's not just these 2 Pokemon. Once this Kangaskhan is gone and cannot use Sucker Punch, this Milotic will almost surely lose to the Sinistcha in the one-on-one, considering Macha healing and dealing so much damage with the single target.
This is one of those spots where actually I would probably think about switching out the Corviknight here to heal up the Incineroar just to get that last attack down into the Kangaskhan. But I mean, you can go either way in this spot, and the low kick goes down into the Sinistcha, so Torviv making the right call in this spot, healing up the Corviknight. That's enough for it to not go down to this skull. Get a Roost up, and that sort of forces this end game to be relatively comfortable overall, because now the combination of Rage Powder and the Corviknight going for any attack into the Kangaskhan whatsoever is perfectly safe.
Yeah, I mean, here there's just not much more to be done, and Marco Fiero throws in the towel. Torviv coming out on top in that one. I mean, just a really, really solid adjustment going into that game 3. We saw Marco actually call out the lead pretty well with that Kangaskhan. getting the fake out and the double edge going, limiting the flow its value. But the Corviknight just continued to get value over the course of that game. And by the time that the Milotic was able to land the burn on it with a Scald, it had already been too late, right? Like the damage had already been done, 2 Pokemon had already been knocked out, and this Kangaskhan was just sitting there with its stage of decreased attack and a Sinistcha waiting in the back. I mean, just masterful play from Torviv there to close out that game 3 and bring the overall score of the friendly match to 10-4 in favor of Team Z.
It's definitely a decisive scoreline overall. There, Team Z really did take this friendly by storm, and you know this is something that is great for us to look out for as the season comes to get introduced to champions in about a month or so. But also looking forward to internationals and the World Championships and the rest of it. We've seen a great example of lots of great play here, but we've also seen how this metagame is so early in its development, and we're seeing how players have been, you know, adapting to that, learning, building, trying to find these really, really impressive calls. And this was a great showcase of how good the community building and the team building is on both sides of the field. Whether or not the matchups were great for either side is one thing, but you can see everybody's going in their own direction. I'm sure we'll find some great stuff coming out of this friendly.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at this, I mean, there's so many 2-1s on this left column, right? Like,
right.
The matches were incredibly close. Some very high-level Pokemon, some very interesting teams, cool techs, and great plays. I would honestly think that this was an absolute pleasure to be part of on both ends as a player and, of course, being here as a caster. Thank you for joining me, Ben. Thank you. It's been a great time, and I mean, I look forward to the next time this happens. Hopefully there's a part 2 in the so near future. We'll see if we get one, maybe post NEIC, post Worlds. I don't know. We'll see. Maybe with Regulation MB, we'll run it again sometime. I don't know. We'll have to see how that goes with the scheduling. But I'm so happy that we could do something like this for the first format of Pokemon Champions. I guess that's all from us. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you once again, Ben, for being here. And thank you to everyone who participated and watched this friendly match between all these incredible players. And I hope that we can do this once again.